When you're cutting something out on a CNC router, it needs to know what material it's cutting it out of, not just like what it's made out of, but what shape that material is. And it also needs to know where 0 is, and so that the computer and the machine, the robot, can agree on what that point is. If you get that wrong, it will try to cut a big hole in your table or move to a place that you didn't anticipate, and can cause a lot of problems. So I like to design my my program using a part that you're cutting out that you're interested in creating, and a stock or a piece of raw wood or plywood or whatever that you're cutting it out of. Make sure that your measurements are correct for what you're actually going to use. I would use I for inspect on the keyboard, or inspect measure, in order to decide to determine what the thickness of your material is by clicking on this line right here. And it's going to tell me that's 1/2 inch, so I'm cutting it out of 1/2 inch material. And the size of my stock, using I for inspect, I can click on this and say it's about 7.5 inches in both directions. So that is what we're going to need to put on the machine to be able to cut it out. Okay. Once you've got your piece positioned exactly in the middle of your stock, you are ready to move to the manufacturing workspace in order to cut it out. So in the top left corner of your screen, you're going to switch from design to manufacture. And in the manufacturer workspace, you've got a whole different set of options and a whole different set of requirements in order to make a program for the CNC router. So you're going to go first to create a setup. A setup includes the size of your stock, which part you're cutting out, and the thickness of the material. First, you need to make sure that your units are in inches. Our machine runs in inches, so you got to go to your units up in the upper left-hand corner and click the little notepad and change your units from millimeters to inches, set as default, and click OK. Then we're going to start our setup. Go to Setup, New Setup. This is going to show where our part is, where our stock is, and where our work coordinates are located. The blue, green, and red arrow are the work coordinates. In this case, I don't have a long axis, so I can position my X and my Y in either direction. I need to make sure my Z is going up and down. If it's incorrect, you can flip arrows by clicking on the pointy end of the arrow, and you can orient them by clicking on the other end of the arrow and then orienting it with a line. That would be incorrect with the Z going not straight up and down, so I can reorient that to a vertical line and then flip it to get it going in the right direction. I want to set my 0 to the table and the corner almost all the time. And I want my X and my Y axes to go in the positive direction. So if I were to move it here, I would find that my X is going in the wrong direction, which I could flip, or I could just move this by clicking on the white dot and moving it to the corner over here to a place that does make sense. I need to select the part that I'm cutting out by going to Model and then click on Nothing here. And then I can select either from my browser on my screen by finding the part, or you can click on it directly on the screen if you're careful. Next thing to do is to set your stock size. That's the second tab over. It's going to do a relative size box by default. And I usually use From Solid as a tool to find the stock that I'm going to be using. So From Solid, and I'm going to select my stock either from the browser or from the piece on the screen. Once you've selected your model, you've moved your work coordinates, and you've selected your stock, you are done with your setup. At this point, it usually makes sense to turn off the stock that you've modeled by using the eyeball in the browser on your screen so you can see your part more clearly. OK, the computer knows that the robot's going to know where the 0 is, where our stock is, and where our part is. Next thing we're going to do is give it actual instructions to cut something out. Now, there's lots of ways to create these instructions. I can click on one of these options here and find the one I want, and I can input all of the data that I would need, and you can see it's quite a bit of data in order to cut this out correctly. Or, as I would highly recommend, you'll use one of my templates that are found usually on Schoology. By going to Schoology, you can go to the CNC Toolpath templates or whatever folder I've got it stored in, and then you can download one of these templates here. To download from Schoology, usually you got to click on it once, I'm going to use my contour toolpath, and then usually you have to click on it one more time in order to actually prompt a download. Then opening that file directly will do nothing but confuse your computer. You need to go back to Fusion in order to open that correctly. And then you can right-click on your setup. Not the setups plural, but the setup you just created. And then say Create from Template. As you can see, I've already downloaded all these and created hundreds more of them. But you're going to need to go to Select Template. And it's a little confusing, but you need to click on Local in order to get a local file, and then usually click on Import in order to import that file. Then I'm going to go to my downloads, find that contour toolpath I just downloaded, opened it, and select it. And now it doesn't really seem to show up. And the last confusing step is it's hidden inside of your setup, and you have to click the down arrow to find it. When you're cutting something out, you need to think about how the piece is going to behave as you cut it out. If I were to cut this thing out and then cut the center circle would move as I was cutting it because the whole part would be moving. So I need to make sure that I cut out my center hole before I cut out the outside contour of the shape. This means that I need two different toolpaths in order to properly space those cuts out. So I'm going to right-click on Setup 1 and Create from Template, and I've already downloaded it, so I'll see it right here. And now I've got two of these. And both of them are empty, so they have this error next to them. I've made it very easy for you at this stage. You don't have to know any of the numbers. You just right-click on that contour and edit it, or double-click on it. And then we're going to go to the second tab, which is Geometry, where you actually select what you'd like to cut. It won't do anything if you click on the top circle. It will work great if you click on the bottom circle at the bottom of that hole, like so. If you click on the red arrow, it'll mess something up. If you've done your setup correctly, it'll already know that you want to cut out the inside of this hole and not the outside of this hole. And then you can say, that's all I need. If I had more circles and more interior cuts, you could add them to that toolpath. Next, I'm going to move to my 2D contour to below this one. I'm going to edit this. Again, go to Geometry, and instead of clicking the bottom of my circle, I'm going to click on the bottom of my outside profile. All the rest has been done for you. All you need to do is click OK, and now the machine knows what to do. A few things you can do to check that it's ready are to double check that your setup has the 0 at the bottom of the stock. Double check that the first one cuts out the middle and the second one cuts out the outside. You can actually drag these to either side of each other if you need to move them. Also, you can double check that the machine is cutting out only a 1/4 inch deep at a time. Because my material is 1/2 inch thick, it's going to show 2 lines or 2 blue toolpath lines as the process for cutting this out with a 1/4 inch bit. The last thing that you can do to check is to simulate your file. I'm going to right-click on Setup 2 and select Simulate. The fun thing to look at is to go into Statistics right away, and it'll say that this cuts out in 55 seconds. Pretty fast. It also takes 7 feet of motion in order to cut it out. That's not super necessary to look at. Mostly you want to look at display, and I find the most useful way is to not show the toolpath and do show the stock. And then you can run the program by clicking the play button to make sure that it's doing what you want. That's kind of frenetic and fast, so let's slow it down a little bit using this bar, and we can watch it cut a little slower. That's a little too boring. Let's speed it up a little bit. And watch how it cuts around the edge. Looks like it does its first pass, and then it plunges deeper and does the second pass, and then it is all done. So everything checks out there. We're ready to post-process our program, which is just write the actual code that the machine can understand. This used to be a long and difficult process, and now it's just a few clicks. Right-click on your setup if you'd like to do the whole setup at once, and hit Post-Process. You'll need to find the right file using the 3 dots over here or the open folder, and it's ShotBot Open SBP. If you need help finding that, you can ask questions, and I'll show you where that is. And then change the program to the name, and usually include your name too, so it's easy to find on the computer. Then I'm going to output it onto a flash drive and post-process it from there.